This podcast is a part of the Podmania podcasting network. Check out podmania.co.uk to check out more of our great podcasts, features, reviews, match ratings and previews spanning the crazy and diverse world of professional wrestling.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Johners. This is episode 86, and today we're going to be talking a little bit of TLC, of course, a WWE pay-per-view that's going to be airing on the WWE Network this coming Sunday, and along with my guest host, who I'll introduce very, very soon, we'll be talking about TLC, the matches, and predicting some of the outcomes, hopefully. We'll be doing our usual recap of this week's NXT and AEW Dynamite, and of course, our guest host will be thrown into the lion's den towards the end of the episode with a 2-minute brainbuster quiz, and we'll see how they get on there, whether they can kind of get us anywhere near the top of the leaderboard, which is currently occupied by Grizz, who has 9 correct answers in 2 minutes. But as I like to do at the beginning of every single episode, is to throw out our social media plugs, so you know where to find us on social media. Say hi, get in touch, ask any questions, and of course you can find us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @withjohners_pod. That's @withjohners_pod. You can find us also on Instagram. Just go out and search us on Instagram, Wrestling with Johners, and go ahead and find our fun, friendly, interactive, ever popular Facebook community page. Just search on Facebook Wrestling with Johners, and that's Johners spelled Johners. And of course, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, please don't forget to hit subscribe so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. You can find the Wrestling with Johners podcast on all popular podcasting platforms, including Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and YouTube, of course. So please spread the word, give us a follow on all of our social media pages, and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels. So I'm going to introduce to you lovely listeners our special guest. He's not been on the podcast before, but you may have seen some of his handiwork on the Facebook page. For those of you that are part of the Wrestling with Johners Facebook page, he's the man behind the cover art for our 1-year anniversary episode of Wrestling with Johners podcast. And I want to introduce to you Nik Towers. So Nick, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm all good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is
you're welcome to. Yeah, it's great to have you on board. And as I alluded to there, Nick, you were the man behind that amazing bit of cover art for our first year anniversary edition of the podcast. And I think I spotted some of your artwork out there on Facebook, and I kind of got in touch and I said, Nick, love what you're doing. I love this picture that I saw. I said, it's our 1-year anniversary coming up soon. How do you fancy kind of doing a bit of artwork? And I think I hinted that I wanted it to be NXT or NXT UK based, and you delivered the goods. So tell us a little bit about that artwork, first of all. And you kind of jumped on board very quickly, and a very important part of that anniversary episode, buddy.
Yeah, well, just been a fan of the page for a while. So obviously we've been talking backwards and forwards just via comments and stuff. And then when you asked me to do that, I'm more than happy to do it. It's just, it helps me get my stuff out there, but also what you guys are doing is awesome. So I was more than happy to offer the support. Yeah, when we talked about it, obviously you mentioned the NXT, and then it was some NXT UK guys. Obviously, with us being UK based, it's nice to show them a bit of love. So yeah, again, it's just what I do, and yeah, if it helps, it helps, and more than happy to do it. And I'm really glad you liked it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it, and one of my favourite pieces of cover art. And I design all my other cover art, but that one really stands up. I think that's possibly my favourite bit of cover art for all of my episodes so far. But you've obviously got a passion and an amazing talent for art, and clearly a big wrestling fan as well. What made you kind of think to combine the two then, and do a lot of your art pieces around professional wrestling then, Nick?
It started off with the British wrestlers. I've been drawing for years and years and years, but I started drawing wrestling themed stuff after I started going to British shows about 9-10 years ago. Yeah. And it was just a way for me to sort of, these guys go out, the guys and girls go out and absolutely smash it for us as entertainment. And it was just my way of saying thank you, obviously supporting the shows and stuff, but it also hopefully gives them a bit of a nice buzz to sort of see some artwork or something that somebody's taken a bit of time for, just for them. And yeah, it started from the British wrestling, and then I kind of, obviously with the emergence, sort of getting onto Twitter, started doing the WWE stuff, and yeah, just sort of trying to get a bit of exposure. The WWE stuff probably was more for a selfish reason, in the sense of trying to get a bit of exposure through those guys, if they retweeted or liked it or quoted it.
And have you had much of a response from any of the wrestlers that you featured in any of your pieces of artwork? Have you had any retweets or any comments from anybody that you featured in any of your pieces?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day when it first started, it was a Kurt Angle piece that I did, which was sort of launched. I think my Twitter was had about 10 followers, and then he retweeted a piece, and I think I went up to about 200 in the space of a night. So that's when I kind of clotted onto the fact of this might be a good way to go forward. But probably the best comment I got was I did an Edge versus Finn Balor t-shirt design for a subscription box, and without any prompting or anything like that, Edge randomly posted it on his Instagram, the picture. I commented on it saying, thanks for, I did this, thanks for, the shout out. And then 5 seconds later, he'd edited the post and tagged me in it, and actually acknowledged myself in the post. And we had a bit of a backwards and forwards in the comments. And it was just, that's probably the highlight. It's just the suddenness that, Edge did that without any prompting or anything. And it just kind of goes to show, as any wrestling fans kind of know, is that he's a genuine stand-up kind of guy. I think he always comes across as being a very likable guy.
Yeah, and to be acknowledged by two of the best, really, Kurt Angle and Edge, with your artwork shows that you're doing something pretty good. We've also posted on the Facebook page a piece you did around AEW, which I absolutely loved as well. And I've seen glimpses of something in connection with NWA or NWA Power. So what pieces of artwork are you working on at the moment, and kind of any plans to do anything different in the future?
I'm working on the NWA Power piece at the minute. That's sort of, I'm hoping to get that sort of done and dusted before Into the Fire is shown, just so I can try and sort of jump on that excitement.
Exactly.
But NWA is one of those shows as well, if it helps sort of get people, if people aren't aware of it, it's one of those shows at the minute that seems to be a bit of a hidden gem. If you know about it, you like it. But not a lot of people that I speak to have even heard of it. So it's a case of check it out. Bit of free publicity from kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've mentioned a few different groups there. You're obviously into your WWE, your NWA, and your AEW. What's your kind of bread and butter? What's your go-to wrestling content on a week-to-week basis? What do you kind of have to kind of set a bit of time aside to watch every single week then, Nick?
I think that's pretty much as what we've sort of said. I don't bother with sort of Raw and SmackDown much anymore. I just tend to go and read the results on Bleacher. But actual to watch, it's NXT, AEW Dynamite, AEW Dark, and NWA Power. That's my sort of bread and butter on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and I think you've got about 5 or 6 hours worth of content listed there, so that's pretty much enough wrestling content for any wrestling fan. To be honest with you, like say, if you do throw in a Raw and a SmackDown, you're talking 10+ hours, and that's you need to have a little bit of a life outside of wrestling occasionally, don't you?
Yes. I need to do my own. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So what I want to do for our listeners before we start talking AEW and NXT then, Nick, is I want to talk just through our schedule of podcasts that we've got lined up over the next 2 to 3 weeks, because it's a fairly busy schedule. I know a lot of podcasters are winding down for the holiday season, for Christmas and New Year, but we're going to keep consistent and keep the episodes going out. So obviously we've got this episode with Nik Towers. On Tuesday, I'm going to be joined by Jason Lee Wood, and Jason's going to be coming on board to help us cover WWE TLC. Myself and Nick are going to be previewing that a little bit later on, but Jason and I will be covering that on a special episode that we drop on Tuesday. So that'll be our TLC review show. Next Saturday, so that's Saturday the 21st of December, will kind of be our last Wrestling with Johners podcast of the year, besides one which I'll mention very, very soon. But next Saturday, the 21st of December, will be our very special end-of-year awards show, where I'll be joined by Ditz from Ditz on Wrestling, another kind of very popular and excellent podcaster that's got a lot of visibility, a lot of popularity on Twitter, of course, a lot of activity there for Ditz. And he's going to be joining as a special co-host for our end-of-year year awards. So if you haven't voted for the end of year awards, I will post the link to the survey or where you can actually put your nominations down for the various categories in the description to this podcast. And I believe that they're also pinned to the top of my Twitter and Facebook pages, so go and check them out. Also, on the 26th of December, it will be our official last podcast of the year 2019, where on the 26th, on Boxing Day, we'll be dropping our special interview with Coastal Championship Wrestling superstar Cha-Cha Charlie. Now, I interviewed Cha-Cha Charlie a couple of days ago. It's an excellent interview. Just putting the finishing touches to that interview before that drops on Boxing Day. So go out and check that out. If you're a fan of Cha-Cha Charlie or any kind of independent wrestling around the Florida area, Coastal Championship Wrestling in particular, you really want to check that one out. That's our special Christmas week episode. And then just into the new year, we've got a big interview with Big Effin' Joe, very, very popular indie star, wrestles all over the UK, recently featured in a CZW deathmatch tournament over in the States. That's going to be really fun to have him on. I know that he's had a couple of encounters with Paul Robinson. In fact, I think he's got an encounter with Paul Robinson for DNA Wrestling tonight. So best of luck to Big Effin' Joe there. We'll be talking all about that on the 2nd of January. And then on the 5th of January, we've got back-to-back episodes. We'll be recording 2 episodes that day to cover New Japan Wrestle Kingdom 14. So I'll be joined by Kurt Johansson to cover day 1, and then I'll be joined by Grizz, who's currently top of the leaderboard in the Brainbuster Quiz. Grizz will be joining us to cover day 2 of Wrestle Kingdom 14, and both of them 2 episodes will be dropping on the 5th of January. So good 3 or 4 episodes there to look forward to. But let's get stuck into this one here with Nick. Nick, this week's NXT. It was a really good show. They're always pretty solid. I know that they've always been a big favourite of mine, especially when they were a 1 hour show. But I say this to all of the guests, since they've gone to 2 hours, they really seem to have stepped it up quite a bit, to be honest with you. So where was expecting the content to be a bit more diluted, maybe, or for there to be, maybe the Vince McMahon influence, we seem to have had completely the opposite. The matches seem to have really stepped up even more, if that was at all possible. The storylines are still there, and you getting even more characters and even more wrestlers featured in this 2 hours. And like I say, I think it's gone from a 9 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10 most weeks now, since it's gone to 2 hours. But what's your kind of overall thoughts on NXT? You're obviously a big fan like I am, and your overall thoughts on the content since it's gone to 2 hours, Nick?
Yeah, I sort of say I agree. Probably every other week it feels like a mini takeover, especially.
It really does, yeah.
Next week you've got the 2 sort of main titles up for potentially, obviously, what I've got a feeling one of them will change. But yeah, there's any concerns. I was probably one of the people that thought as soon as it went to a network, it's like, oh crap, Vince is going to get involved here. He's going to start messing stuff up. We're going to start getting some Michael Cole is Adam Cole's dad storyline or something like that. I think Trips has kind of kept a tight rein on it. He's been left to his own devices, and it shows. It's just getting better and better. The only problem is that when it was on the network, they were able to have a few development matches, and it not be a big deal. But now it's on TV. I think Wednesday's gone. There was 1 match on that show which would have been fine on the network, but on TV, it's going to be a bit of a risky move.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They probably would have shown a few more of the kind of lower rung talents in the 1 hour show, but now they're really kind of pumping out the bigger names on the brand, which is fine. But I understand your sentiments there entirely. But then that's a bit of a challenge for those kind of on the lower end of the NXT roster to try a bit harder, work a bit harder, and hopefully get on that 2 hour show. And there's been a few people that I've been surprised to see on there. We've had quite a lot of Xia Li. Now, I know that she wasn't heavily featured on the 1 hour show, but she's been in quite a few matches since it's gone to 2 hours. So one or two are kind of making a bit of a name for himself, whereas before maybe they weren't as exposed. So I suppose it swings and roundabouts. But let's have a little look at this week's show then. So the opening of this week's show promoted the massive match happening in the main event of this week's show, which is going to be a triple threat match between Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee and Finn Balor, battling out it's a number one contenders match essentially, and the winner going on to face NXT champion Adam Cole on next week's huge edition of NXT that you you alluded to earlier on, and that's going to be on next week. But we'll talk more about that triple threat match a little bit later on. But this week's NXT really kicked off with a barn burner, with an absolute banger, to be honest with you. Lio Rush putting his NXT Cruiserweight Championship on the line against a crowd favourite, you could say, in Angel Garza. Now, this was a really hot way to kick off the show, and there was some bad blood between these two even before the bell rang, and I think Lio Rush even got stuck into Garza before the bell sounded. The fans were super hot for this one. Garza even pulled Lio Rush off the ring apron, with Rush landing face first quite hard onto the ring apron, and that looked pretty painful. Lio then connected with a moonsault. Now, he springboarded himself from inside the ring to the outside onto Garza and down onto the floor. Rush goes to the top rope, but he's nailed with a step up enziguri, setting up Garza perfectly to deliver an awesome avalanche Spanish fly for a very, very close near fall, and that was greeted with holy shit chants from the fans. Then Rush delivers Angel Garza's very own finishing move, the wing clipper, and gets a 2 count for his troubles there. Lio finally manages to deliver his final hour frog splash, but Garza had presence of mind enough to roll out of the ring before Lio Rush could make the cover. Then the fans absolutely lose their mind as Rush attempts a second final hour from the top of the turnbuckle to the outside, but Garza manages to bring up his knees. He rolls Lio Rush back inside the ring, delivers his wing clipper finisher. Everyone thinks that the referee is going to count to the 3, but Rush somehow manages to kick out on 2 3/4. Garza, with the two of them kind of still in the seated position, having executed the wing clipper, Garza very cleverly slaps on a full Nelson onto Rush. The referee calls for the bell within a few seconds as Rush fails to respond, and Garza wins the match through submission thanks to the full Nelson and becomes the new NXT Cruiserweight Champion. So that, in my opinion, is how to open a wrestling show. Both wrestlers had the fans on their feet for this one. This was a super hot match, and we have a new Cruiserweight champion in Angel Garza. But credit to Lio Rush. I'd say he was only a champion for maybe a couple of months after taking the belt off of Drew Gulak. He made a pretty good champion while he had it, but a brilliant match. A great way to kick off NXT. Nick, give us your thoughts on this one, buddy.
This was an absolutely amazing match. It's the old sort of analogy of, if you're not in the main event, go out first, set the bar, and absolutely just smash it. This match is, I'll mention it sort of later on when we talk about the main event, but I can't actually decide whether this match was better or the main event was better. That's how good this match was when you look at the caliber of people that were in the main event. Rush and Angel, just the story involved, the emotion, absolutely nailed it. I just couldn't sort of, wish for anything more from that match.
Yeah, definitely. And then after the match, we get a bit of an emotional moment where we see Angel Garza bringing his girlfriend into the ring and proposing to his girlfriend in the centre of the ring to lots of C chants from the fans. Obviously, that's yes in Spanish. And she did say C, she did say yes. And that was a good moment they managed to catch on camera. And so not only did Angel Garza win a championship bout on Wednesday night, but he also managed to get a yes answer from his girlfriend when he proposed to her. So a really special moment there. Going into match number 2, then we had Raul Mendoza versus Cameron Grimes. Now, prior to this match, we see highlights of Cameron Grimes attacking Mendoza on the rampway ahead of Mendoza's scheduled match against the returning Kushida on last week's show. As we saw, the match got switched at the last second with Kushida defeating Cameron Grimes. Then we saw footage of Cameron Grimes attacking Kushida at the WWE PC, the Performance Center last week. So Mendoza goes on the offense to begin this match, nailing a springboard tornado dive onto Grimes on the outside. And just as Grimes starts to get the upper hand, we see Kushida. He comes out to distract Cameron Grimes, allowing Mendoza to drop Grimes with a Hurricane Rana and a surprise pinfall victory. So after the match, Kushida takes a liking to Cameron Grimes' trademark hat, taking it backstage to no doubt add it to his own collection of fine hats, I'm sure, and to add to the heat between himself and Cameron Grimes. So that storyline continues. So a bit of a surprise in Mendoza getting the win here, but it kind of plays along to the storyline they've been telling so far, Nick, between Kushida and Cameron Grimes. And Grimes lost last week on NXT. He's lost again. It looks like he had a really good run for the first few weeks on NXT, kind of winning back-to-back matches. But he's on a bit of a losing streak now, and the feud between him and Kushida seems to be hotting up somewhat.
Yeah, being big fan of Grimes. Liked him in TNA when he had Helmsley as manager. Obviously, you know, they're the guys that trained him. It's the problem with Grimes they've got now is he's just, as you said, he's lost the last 2 matches. He's probably one of the fresher talents that they're showing on NXT. And I would obviously hazard a guess that he's going to end up eventually losing the feud with Kushida because it's Kushida. You know, this guy's a potential title holder in a few months' time. They've got to sort of not sacrifice Grimes for the sake of that, keep him, because he could be a breakout star within the next 12 months. They've just got to make sure, you know, they don't taint him too much.
Yeah, and as everybody knows, anybody that listens to his podcast, we're big fans of Cameron Grimes on his podcast. And like I say, hopefully it's not kind of the start of a slippery slope where he loses more matches or potentially loses the feud to Kushida. But I'm looking forward to when they do finally meet. I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of in an up-and-coming episode of NXT. It's not been advertised yet for next week's show. Or have you heard when that match might be taking place, Nick?
Not myself, but I'll probably hazard a guess. Obviously, we've got all the stuff next week.
Yeah,
might get a spot next week just to continue the story. But I'd probably say within about the 4-week mark. Hopefully, it'll be a main event on one of the NXTs or the opening match on NXT. If they can use that to set the bar for the rest of the episode, I think those two could go out and do Rush and Angel and just actually, you know, get the fans excited for the following 2 hours.
No, you're absolutely spot on there, Nick. I think if you're not going to close the show, it's definitely important to open the show. And I think these two are going to have a really show-stealing match when they do finally get in the ring. And looking forward to that one. And then we got a wrestler on NXT that I wasn't expecting to see this week. We saw that the Kiwi buzzsaw, Travis Banks, go up against, well, I suppose you could say 2 wrestlers that we weren't expecting to see wrestle on this week's NXT, because he was going up against Jackson Ryker. Now, usually Jackson Ryker, he's kind of the muscle, the third guy to the Forgotten Sons. I can't remember. I think he might have been in a battle royal or maybe 2 singles matches in the last year or so. But he's usually the henchman kind of on the outside for Blake and Cutler. Here, he's in a singles match going up against Travis Banks. Now, Travis Banks is a bit of a mainstay on NXT UK. We've not seen him on NXT before. I certainly can't remember seeing him on the Black and Gold brand. So it's interesting to see this dynamic between 2 wrestlers we haven't really seen much of on this TV show. But this was a really fun match. And it was great to see a fresh face in the shape of Travis Banks, as I said, on the Black and Gold brand. And pulling off somewhat of a shock against Jackson Ryker. And he got the pinfall victory after his Slice of Heaven finishing move, despite suffering quite a nasty cut above his left eye early in the match. So give us your thoughts on this one then. 2 quite interesting wrestlers that we've not seen a lot of on this brand anyway. We've seen a fair bit of Banks on NXT UK, but what's your impression of Jackson Ryker? I mean, he certainly looks the part. He looks like the type of wrestler that a Vince McMahon might get behind and try and push to the moon, but I don't think he's an established technical wrestler that we might be used to seeing on NXT, but this was quite an interesting match and a bit of a surprising ending as well. I wasn't expecting Banks to take the pinfall, if I'm honest with you, but what were your thoughts on this one?
I think it was a good prelude to Worlds Collide. It was obviously giving Banks a bit of just to get the fans, you know, just to get them show a bit of interest. If these UK guys can turn up and get a couple of victories over NXT, it puts more at stake for Worlds Collide. It obviously heightens the wow factor, hopefully. Ryker is great. Again, somebody else who I was a fan of back in the day when I used to watch TNA. And he's quality. He's good at what he does. He is well suited to the henchman role, but when he does need to have a match, you know, the guy can deliver. You put Banks in there as well, and it was always going to be a good, solid match. I think Banks is a great talent.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it is a bit of a prelude to the Worlds Collide show, which is replacing TakeOver prior to Royal Rumble at the back end of January. And but I think a lot of fans are slightly disappointed that we're not going to have a proper TakeOver. It is a TakeOver of sorts, but it's going to be NXT talent versus NXT UK talent. So some potential dream matches there. I know a lot of people are talking about the possibility of having Imperium versus Undisputed Era, or maybe Adam Cole versus Walter. And like I say, you throw in some UK talent there like Tyler Bates and Trent Seven. Maybe we can see Pete Dunne on the card as well. So some mouth-watering potential matches there when you factor in some of the UK talents and giving them an opportunity on a big stage over in the States, Royal Rumble weekend against the NXT talent. So that's going to be pretty good, pretty mouth-watering kind of thoughts on what could happen there. But the next match was one of the highlights of the night as far as I'm concerned, and it was Mia Yim versus Dakota Kai. So this was a bit of a grudge match of sorts, stemming from when Dakota's she attacked Mia Yim before TakeOver War Games, leading to Dakota Kai replacing Mia Yim in the War Games match, and of course she then attacked Tegan Nox. So essentially eliminating herself or choosing not to be part of the match, but essentially turning heel during that whole segment where she turned her back on former best friend and team kick stablemate Tegan Nox. And I believe this heel turn for Dakota Kai has been a real step in the right direction, to be honest with you. I think that her babyface character was a little bit weak and a little bit bland, to be honest with you. It was kind of another version of Bayley, to be honest with you, the happy-go-lucky Dakota Kai. But I think, much like it did with Io Shirai, I think this heel turn for Dakota Kai has been, kind of ready-made for her, really. It's been a perfect step in the right direction. Have you become more of a fan of Dakota Kai since the heel turn, Nick?
Oh, tenfold. That was genuine. During the War Games, that was one of the moments where I just literally jaw dropped when she turned, and the aftermath of that has been brilliant. I think she's become probably one of the, as much as I love the Ripley Baszler stuff, anything with Dakota Kai in at the minute is just my go-to. It's what I'm interested in on a week-to-week basis. Seeing her obviously get through my Yim. She gets through somebody else after that, and you just waiting week in, week out, just for Tegan Nox to turn up, just wait for her to come out through the audience, and just absolutely crack her one. It's just that's the anticipation. That's what this storyline's giving you. It's that anticipation.
Yeah, I think they're playing this storyline to a T, to be honest with you, absolutely perfectly. I love the fact that Dakota Kai is using Tegan Nox's leg brace as a little bit of a kind of a memento and a weapon. And that kind of really adds to her heel persona. But the end of the match, and this very entertaining match, came after Mia Yim prevented Dakota Kai from utilising the knee brace of Tegan Nox, of course. However, Dakota did manage to pull away one of the turnbuckle pads before driving Mia Yim headfirst into the exposed turnbuckle, covering and then getting the 1-2-3. But the big talking point of these two happened after the match. So after the match, the action continued as the two, Mia Yim and Dakota Kai, fought around the ring and into the technical area up on the stage, where Mia Yim, she back suplexed or Seoto suplexed Dakota Kai off the staging area and down onto a couple of tables, 2 tables set up down below. However, it appeared that the move didn't quite go to plan, as both women only went through the first table, with Dakota Kai's head hitting the second table pretty hard. And it's reported that Dakota Kai has had to have 8 or 9 staples in the back of her head to close a wound post-match. So I mean, the match was good. The action was good. We got a win for Dakota Kai through nefarious means using the exposed turnbuckle pad. But then the action afterwards, that brawl, and then it looked a pretty dangerous spot, to be honest with you. That suplex off of the kind of stage area through the table, and then the kind of the clatter of Dakota Kai's head. Man, that looked like it hurt both of the wrestlers, to be honest with you.
It would have been a little bit nicer if they'd gone through both tables, but yeah, because they went through the first one, the back of Kai's head, that was just kind of very cringeworthy.
Yeah, I remember a similar spot when the Shield were kind of fairly new in the WWE. It might have been TLC. Oh, I think TLC. There was the Shield, and I think it was Daniel Bryan, Kane, and Ryback in a triple threat main event TLC match. And Seth Rollins came off the top of a ladder. I think Ryback either chokeslammed or pushed him off the top of a ladder. And Seth Rollins was meant to go through 2 tables, and he only went through 1 and clattered his head against the second table. So a similar injury there. And at the end of TLC, you could see Ambrose and Roman Reigns kind of holding a very groggy Seth Rollins. But this match was brought back memories of that. And but Dakota Kai, she's been very public in saying she's not taking any time off, and she's going to kind of wrestle at the first opportunity, which is good as far as I'm concerned. And then we get a match between Breezango and the Singh brothers, or the Bollywood boys, whatever you want to call them. to be honest, I enjoyed this match way more than I thought I was going to. There were some nice double team moves from Breezango and from Fandango and Breeze, of course. There was one spot where Fandango dropped one of the Singh brothers with a brutal power bomb across the edge of the ring apron. Now that looked pretty vicious. I winced when I saw that one. And despite appearing to injure himself off of a flying elbow onto one of the Singh brothers on the outside, Fandango did put the match away with a top rope leg drop for the pinfall victory. Now after the match, I think there was a couple of injury. There was an injury report that came out after this episode of NXT, and of course Dakota Kai was on that injury report, but Fandango was on that injury report as well. And apparently he's injured his wrist. Off of the elbow from the top turnbuckle to the outside, and possible fracture to his wrist. So we're waiting to see what happened there. But as I said in my opening line, I enjoyed this match way more than I thought I was going to. But what about yourself, Nick?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. When I saw the match starting, I was like, okay, it's going to be a squash match. They just sent the Singh brothers out there just to get demolished within a few minutes kind of thing. Because they've always kind of just been seen as the sidekicks, obviously, for Mahal. But no, it was a ridiculously entertaining match. It was more than expected. They held their own. It actually became a very good back and forth match. Love Breezango, but I'm slightly disappointed with the fact that they're still together. When Breeze came back down to NXT, I was generally pumped to see Prince Pretty by himself again. So hopefully in the future he'll get a solo run. But as a tag team, they're entertaining. And who doesn't love a sexy nurse at the start?
Yeah, and I think it's there we go. That always helps, doesn't it? But I think it's testament to, and we've alluded to this. It's testament to the fact that when main roster talent go back to NXT, they wrestle with a lot more freedom. The handcuffs are off. They're able to go out and perform a good wrestling match and tell a good story without the restrictions of, reams and reams of, promo lines they need to remember, or very scripted matches, or 2-minute segments, and they can go out there and have a proper wrestling match. And we even got a decent wrestling match from the Singh brothers. Now I know they're kind of veterans of the squared circle. They've been wrestling for well over 10 years now, I believe, because they started wrestling in I think Toronto, Canada, many years before we saw them on a WWE TV. So they're experienced wrestlers, and we know how good Fandango. And they mentioned during this NXT this week that Fandango is a 20-year veteran, so he's been wrestling for 20 years. I thought, first of all, he doesn't look like he's been wrestling. He doesn't look old enough to have been wrestling for 20 years. But I remember seeing him when kind of NXT was kind of the weekly TV show before it kind of went to what it is now, I suppose. And I know he was Johnny Curtis back then, and before he got transformed into Fandango that we know nowadays. And of course he beat Chris Jericho at one of the WrestleManias. But he's been in WWE for 10 years plus. He's probably in developmental, probably in the late 2000s or maybe early 2010s. And, before that, he was obviously scratching and clawing on the independents before he got noticed. So, 20 years, that would make sense, I suppose. But he doesn't look old enough to be a 20-year vet. But there we go. But testament to the fact that when
he was like 16 or something.
Exactly. Must have started early. I think he must be in his mid-30s, most definitely. But like I say, testament to the fact that when they go back to NXT, they can wrestle with a lot more freedom. And that definitely, I'm not going to kind of judge a book by its cover any further when I see wrestlers like this, because I know they're going to go out and absolutely smash it. And they smashed it on this occasion. And then we saw a fairly competitive match between Bianca Belair and Kaden Carter, with Belair ending the match in a fairly strong fashion. Firstly with a devastating spear, and then following it up with a KOD finisher for the 1-2-3. Then ahead of this week's main event, we had an appearance from current NXT champion Adam Cole. And of course, Adam Cole came out and he'll be defending his championship against the winner of this triple threat number one contenders match, which is, of course, between Keith Lee, Tommaso Ciampa, and the Prince, Finn Balor. So Adam Cole kind of looked on from some gantry area, and this match was excellent. I know you said earlier that it's tough to call which was the better match on this week's NXT. Was it the opener between Lio Rush and Angel Garza, or was it this triple threat? But Keith Lee was the first to strike in this match, slingshotting himself all 320, 30, 40 pounds, however big the guy is. His weight seems to go up every single week, but he's just as agile every time we see him. He slingshots himself into the ring with a double crossbody onto both Balor and Ciampa. There's one spot in this match where Ciampa had Balor up for an air raid crash from the top turnbuckle when Lee came along and hoisted both of his opponents up onto his shoulders in like an electric chair and dropped both of them. So Ciampa still had Balor up in the air raid crash, and they both suffered from Keith Lee's bad landing there. Balor soon takes control, drop kicking Ciampa into the barriers at ringside, but misses a coup de grace on Lee. Then Ciampa almost has the match won with a huge air raid crash on Lee for a close near fall. Keith Lee then gets a close near fall from a second rope moonsault. Always impressive when the big man does that. But after Keith Lee delivers his huge spirit bomb on Ciampa, Finn Balor comes out of nowhere. He wastes no time at all in nailing Keith Lee while he still sat down from his spirit bomb with a second coup de grace. This time Finn Balor nails it perfectly. His coup de grace double foot stomp hooks the leg of Keith Lee, gets the pinfall victory against the big man to become the new number one contender to Adam Cole's championship. So post match, we get a rather jubilant Finn Balor pulling the double gun salute on Adam Cole as the rest of the Undisputed Era come out to support Adam Cole on the rampway as the show goes off the air. So, like I say, it's a tough one to call which was the better match, but personally, I enjoyed the hell out of this match. It's probably the second best match of the night as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anybody could, they set the bar high with that opener, but this was a brilliant match between all three. I'm loving the hell out of Keith Lee at the minute. He had a fantastic November. He's having just as good a December, to be honest with you. And I think if he's not challenging for at least the NXT Championship in the next couple of months, then I'll be very, very surprised. But amazing to see Finn Balor pull out the win here, and good to see Finn Balor kind of back on top form and pulling the double gun salute. So he's going to be taking on Adam Cole on next week's NXT. So give us your thoughts on this main event, then, buddy.
Mate, like you said, it was, if it wasn't for that opening match, this would have been easily the match of the night. I think the good thing about it was as well is potentially any three of those guys could have won, because logically any of them can go for the title. So it was, I think they've done the right thing by having Balor in. I think he's the right choice to go up against Cole first of all. Potentially, I'll sort of see him lose, ready for the Johnny Gargano feud. But all three of these guys are just off the chart. Ciampa's just a legend, a living legend now within NXT. Keith Lee's not quite ready for the title. I might get some stick for that. But I can see him getting it within 6 months. He'll get a title shot, I think, within a couple of months. But yeah, Keith Lee's obviously on a wave at the minute. The fans are behind him. It depends whether they want to ride that out and put the belt on him now whilst he's hot. But yeah, the match was everything you thought it was going to be. You got these three guys in the ring. It was never going to be a bad match, and it was nice to see Finn back to his best, I would say. Since he's been back, the match with Riddle was all right, but it wasn't as good, I think, as expected. So it was nice to see the old Finn back in this one. I think he's not lost it.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, in fact, he's kind of found whatever he had lost on the main roster, because he seems to be rejuvenated, revitalized, re-energized, call it what you will, but Finn Balor, kind of that we remember from when he first joined NXT, but certainly his New Japan days, as Prince Devitt. He's definitely back. And but this was another awesome 2 hours of NXT. That incredible opener between Angel Garza. Like I say, I think that's my match of the night, in my opinion. And Angel Garza becoming the new champion, defeating Lio Rush, of course. I love the match between Mia Yim and Dakota Kai, and that suplex going through the tables and that Dakota Kai clattering her head was just absolutely brutal. The main event triple threat match was also brilliant, but more than anything, I love how Finn Balor just seems to be refreshed and revitalized again. And like I say, we've got Finn Balor wrestling with some freedom that he wasn't getting on the main roster, unfortunately, and probably sound like a bit of a broken record because I say that most weeks, but he's come back and he's looking good. But what were your kind of highlights for this week's? Go ahead.
He needs to change his entrance music. We need to feel music.
Yeah. I think because his entrance music was so kind of fan interactive, you could say, with the raising of the arms, and they do kind of switch it up sometimes when somebody turns heel and makes it a bit more darker, a bit more menacing music. And maybe I think with a different character, you're quite right. I think you need different music. So maybe that's just the final piece of the puzzle that they need to complete there with Finn Balor. But what were the highlights of this week's NXT for you then, buddy?
That first match, it was just, I think that was definitely the out and out highlight. I think the most enjoyable moment was not any of the matches for me. I got a slightly warm fuzzy feeling just seeing Kushida wearing Grimes' hat. If I ever get to experience any kind of happiness, as happy as Kushida looks when he had that hat on, that's my new life goal. That's me living my best life. Kushida wearing Grimes' hat, that was my highlight. I think that's just picture perfect.
Christmas came early for Kushida. In the form of Cameron Grimes' hat. But speaking of unshackled, let's talk a little bit about AEW Dynamite, because they're always unshackled, and another top-notch episode of Dynamite. Week 11 of AEW Dynamite. So this week's AEW starts with the man of the moment, Jon Moxley, to open the show with a match against... I don't think they actually introduced who his opponent was, so I didn't catch his name, to be honest with you. But it didn't matter because Moxley kind of put the match to bed with a running knee and a paradigm shift. It took 2 moves and 30 seconds for Jon Moxley to put the match away, or however long it was. They described it as the quickest match in AEW history, so it may have been a lot quicker than that. However, Moxley's celebration was cut short with the appearance of the Inner Circle with their leader, Le Champion, Chris Jericho, of course. Jericho cautiously stepped into the ring with a microphone in hands, and Jericho, he praises Moxley on his run so far in AEW. Jericho tells Moxley how Moxley came to him, asking him for advice 10 years earlier, wanting to know what he needed to do to get over. Obviously, they're referring to their time together in WWE, and this would have been before Dean Ambrose was part of the Shield, and for such a long time, Dean Ambrose was in developmental for FCW, and then NXT very briefly before coming onto the main roster as the Dean Ambrose we know from the Shield, of course. Jericho tells how they became adversaries, and that they would beat the living shit out of one another, as Jericho described, and how Jericho taught Moxley how to be a top superstar, and how Jericho brought him into AEW when Mox left the WWE in spring of this year. Jericho continued to compliment Mox and tells him that he needs to be part of the Inner Circle. Jericho offers Moxley a chance to join the Inner Circle and tells him that he can take some time to think about it and enjoy the holidays, and when he's ready to give them an answer, they will be waiting. So Jericho reveals an Inner Circle t-shirt, which he drapes over Jon Moxley's shoulder and slowly walks away, as Mox kind of stands there reflecting on what just happened, just mulling over the moment, and contemplating the possibility of maybe joining the Inner Circle. But this was, I'd say, a neat way to open up. I know that Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho are definitely ratings winners, and I'm sure everybody's eyes were glued to this segment. And a lot of people might have been expecting Jon Moxley to attack Chris Jericho. I think that the long-term booking is obviously for these two face for the AEW World Championship. But at the moment, the storyline is kind of quite an intriguing one. And I wasn't expecting to go this route, to be honest with you, with Chris Jericho trying to get on the good side of Jon Moxley and possibly trying to recruit him into the Inner Circle. But what were your thoughts on what we witnessed in this opening segment of AEW on Wednesday?
Loved it. It's money, as you sort of said. Moxley and Jericho, probably the two biggest recognisable names in AEW. And I think AEW benefits from having, obviously, I think February is the next pay-per-view, Revolution.
Yeah, the 29th, so it's the leap year day, the 29th of Feb, yeah.
But I think we're going to have, it's going to be a nice sort of 2-month build-up. We've got that benefit because there's not a pay-per-view every month. You can take it gradual, you can build it up. It's like old-school storytelling, and it just... Moxley and Jericho will, they've got the skills to do this. Moxley's probably waiting on Jericho to ask for the money for the jacket again. But I loved it. I think you get these two guys in the ring together. Like I said, it was a change of dynamic after the last 2 weeks with the staring each other down. You kind of thought when they did come face to face, it would just end up in a brawl. But the fact that they're starting the story like this obviously gives it more scope for, the weeks coming where they can build up on it.
Yeah, they're definitely doing the right thing by giving it a bit of a slow burn, building the storyline. They know what they've got in the shape of Jon Moxley and Chris Jericho. They know what they've got. They know they've got two of the best workers in the business in terms of character work, in terms of in-ring experience. They know what they've got. I think above and beyond maybe Cody and Kenny Omega, these are the two best acquisitions that AEW have made. Let them do their thing in the ring. Let them, use their experience to tell a story. And it's really, really paying off, and it's really showing. And certainly this segment, it kind of showed all their experience coming out and telling that story. And I loved how they kind of harked back, or Chris Jericho harked back to their WWE days. They didn't mention the company by name, but it was obvious that they were that he was referring to the Dean Ambrose character when they did feud Chris Jericho versus Dean Ambrose a few years ago now. I think it's about 2015, 2016. And there was a potted plant involved, and there was a horrible Ambrose Asylum match, which you may remember. But they do have some history, and obviously Chris Jericho's taking credit for kind of guiding him when he first started with WWE 10 years ago, and giving him some influential advice that kind of helped him become a superstar, and then ultimately bringing him into AEW. Of course, the two of them know each other very well from Jericho's podcast as well. And so I love the story they're telling. You can really tell that the experience of these two just oozing out. And it was a bit of an unexpected segment, but Jon Moxley standing there at the end of the segment with a t-shirt draped over his shoulder, is telling a great story, and kind of it's one that we're all kind of going to be wondering what's going to be happening next, and one of them kind of hooks that's going to get us to watch week in, week out. But we probably won't get to see the kind of the two of them have any sort of fisticuffs for a few weeks. I think they're going to let it kind of build, and I'm sure that this will be the main event at their February pay-per-view. But loved the hell out of this opening segment, definitely. But any final thoughts on this opening segment before we move on, Nick?
Like I say, it's just, I think what you'll find is all throughout January they'll just tease it. There won't actually be any physicality all the way through January. It might even be that Box, goes double agent and sort of winds Jericho up by pretending to accept the Inner Circle invite, to just then eventually do like a Daniel Bryan to Bray Wyatt years ago. That turn. I think the first show in February will be the kickoff for the physicality of it all. So we get a teaser for a few weeks before the pay-per-view. But I would like to keep no physical action throughout January. Tell a story. They've got the skills to keep us entertained via promos and stuff like that don't need to lay hands on each other until probably a few weeks before the pay-per-view.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think many wrestling angles have been blown off too quickly by the two individuals getting physical after maybe a week's build or 2 weeks build. And that's typical of what the WWE would do. But they're doing things slightly differently in AEW. And I'm loving what they're doing here. And then we go into the first match on AEW Dynamite. And it was the Butcher and the Blade versus Cody and QT Marshall. So now, from what I understand, QT was a partner chosen by Cody's arch enemy at the moment, MJF, with MJF thinking that QT Marshall would be the weak link in the team, giving Cody an automatic disadvantage. But the two heels, the Butcher and the Blade, go on a bit of a tear against the lesser QT. But the fans get behind and start rallying behind QT as the match progresses. Cody gets a close near fall from a moonsault on the Blade. Cody then displays some impressive agility that we're used to some agility from Cody, but he's obviously experimented a bit here, and he executed a springboard cutter from the top turnbuckle, from the top rope for a close near fall. So that was pretty neat. QT gets tagged back in. He hits a handspring corkscrew plancher before nearly winning the match with a senton off the top turnbuckle. Cody then gets taken out of the match he gets slammed onto the ring apron, allowing the Butcher and the Blade to destroy the spirited QT Marshall with a suplex backstabber combo for the win. And after the match, Darby Allin comes charging down to the ring to help Cody to his feet. So probably similar to one of the other matches I mentioned earlier, Breezango versus the Singh brothers. This was a match that was far more entertaining than I thought it was going to be at the very beginning. Probably far more entertaining than it deserved to be. They told a good story. which is something that AEW have kind of fallen a little bit shy on in some of their matches. But they told a good story. There was some good action. They've potentially established another star in QT Marshall because the fans really got behind him. And it's the first match that I can recall on AEW from the Butcher and the Blade. So they've certainly established themselves in this match as well. So quite an interesting match, quite a few talking points coming out of this one. And then Darby Allin coming down kind of at the end to help Cody to his feet. What was that all about? Is he aligning himself with Cody? But so what were your thoughts on what went down during this whole match?
Yeah, it was a perfect story match. It was a match all about that hot tag. He put QT in there to fail basically, and it was about him, taking the hits, taking the bumps, building up the anticipation, getting the crowd worked up off that hot tag. As soon as he tagged Cody in, that's it. The roof went off. It was a weird match because, like you sort of said, I wasn't expecting that much from it because I don't know that much about the Butcher and the Blade. And obviously QT was put in there as a lesser element. It was to put the spotlight on Cody. But yeah, the match was great. The fact that the fans were cheering for QT by the end of the match just tells you how well it was done. The fact that they were able to get behind this guy or wanted to get behind this guy. And as you said, it was a story match in a tag match. It wasn't just your stereotypical AEW tag match, which is wrestle, 6 minutes in, like shit hits the fan, everybody's in the ring kind of thing. This was a really well structured tag match, and it served the purpose. And plus, you got Darby Allin, which is always a plus. Is anytime you see him on the screen, if it leads to a future storyline for him, all for it.
Yeah, totally agree. Then we get to MJF. He comes out to the ring with his bodyguard Wardlow to humiliate and attack a tech guy or a camera guy at ringside before addressing Cody, telling Cody that when he thinks of the word fake, he thinks of Cody and mocks Cody's speech impediment. MJF challenges Cody to a one-on-one match, but tells Cody that there will be added stipulations, which will be announced by MJF himself at their Jacksonville show on the 1st of January 2020. So MJF continues to impress on the microphone. He's I know that there's could be many contenders for best heel in the company, but MJF, in terms of his microphone ability and the way that he can really stick it to the fans and stick it to his opponents on the microphone, I don't think there's anybody quite as good as MJF at the moment. Are you a fan of MJF? Do you like his work? I mean, I don't think he's established as an in-ring worker compared to his ability on the microphone. Maybe he is. I don't think I've seen an awful lot of him in the ring, if I'm honest with you. I think the most we see of MJF is when he's got a microphone in his hand, giving it to somebody. But your thoughts on MJF? Are you a fan of his?
Definitely a fan of him on the mic. Unfortunately, the one time we have seen him in the ring, obviously against Hangman, was he blew the Crossroads sort of spot. Whether that was that was the last memory of that match. But on the mic, the guy's off the chart. I mean, it's everybody knew he was going to turn on Cody. We've known this from day one. He came into it as a heel, and obviously it was a bit of a surprise when he was the top face's best friend, which was just like, okay, he's going to turn on him at some point. But the fact that it got the reaction that it did when he did turn speaks volumes for MJF. When he's on the mic, the guy's gold. I remember watching Dark a few weeks ago, and he was doing guest commentary. I was howling. Some of the stuff he was coming out with is just, he's quick, he's got a great brain. The dude's just an absolute star.
He really is. And then we had a match between Big Swole versus Emi Sakura. So this was an entertaining match with Big Swole winning the match on her official AEW Dynamite debut. Over the number 3 seed with a rolling elbow strike. So Big Swole getting a big win there on her debut. And then we get a match between Superbad Kip Sabian and Sean Spears versus Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega. So now when it comes to a wrestler having that megastar aura, Kenny Omega has that special megastar aura as far as I'm concerned whenever he's anywhere near a wrestling ring. And you definitely felt it when he made his entrance, with his entrance music, the reception he got from the fans. He's got that special it factor as far as I'm concerned. This was another really good match, and it was great to see Kip Sabian hang in there with three of the biggest stars in AEW. Well, maybe with the exception of Shawn Spears, but this match was progressing nicely. That was until the lights in the arena went out, and then when the lights came back on, we saw Shawn Spears' mentor Tully Blanchard tied to a chair on the stage area with Joey Janela standing over Tully, causing Spears to kind of abandon his partner and run to Tully Blanchard's aid. Sabian was left all alone by to be greeted with a V-trigger from Omega, followed by the buckshot lariat from Hangman Page for the relatively easy pinfall win. So Kip Sabian was kind of left at the mercy of Omega and Adam Page in this one. But give us your thoughts, Nick, on what we saw here from the four guys involved, the match and the angle we witnessed with Tully Blanchard being used as a bit of a pawn in the war between Shawn Spears and Joey Janela. Did you enjoy this one?
Yeah, I did. First of all, it's awesome to see Kip, as you sort of pointed out, hanging with the three big stars of AEW. I think the dude I just literally before I watched this week's, I've watched last week's Dark, which was him versus Omega in the main event. And yeah, the fact that these guys are giving Kip that time to do stuff like that, I think hopefully it's because they see something in him and he's going to be a big star. Obviously, you've got Omega and Hangman in the ring. That's in itself awesome, and I liked potentially are we seeing at the start of a heel turn by Page, the fact that he tagged himself in at the end to get the 1, 2, 3 and kind of left Omega looking a bit puzzled. That's that's a good observation from yourself there. Yeah, carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you there. Yeah, no, it's all good. But yeah, and obviously Spears is. I'm all for Spears and Joey continuing the feud. Even it gives them a purpose to be there. It gives them a storyline. I think Spears is very underrated, and if Joey can get the rub off of Spears, that's got to be good in the long run as well.
Yeah, definitely. But a really good observation from yourself, and Adam Page tagging himself in. Kenny Omega looking a bit puzzled as the match came to its conclusion, and I personally think the character of the current Hangman Adam Page is a bit bland. If I'm honest with you, I think he's pretty good in the ring, but I think his character is a bit bland. So maybe, as it does with most heel turns, it will elevate that character, add a bit more depth to the character, and maybe that's what Adam Page needs. Now I know that he's had a bit of a long-term feud now with Pac. Pac obviously is the clear-cut heel in that feud. But the dynamic between those two, if Adam Page were to turn a bit darker, that could be quite interesting. Or potentially, maybe Adam Page has gone as far as he's likely to go as a babyface, and maybe to progress any further, or potentially to be anywhere near the world title picture again. Maybe he does need to turn heel.
I think eventually at some point you're going to get a War Games style match between obviously the Inner Circle and the Elite. And just to, I don't know, a 6 month in advance spoiler, that would be the perfect time to turn Page heel. He can cost the Elite that match against the Inner Circle and join the Inner Circle. That would be a slow build.
Yeah, quite an interesting booking there, but that could definitely happen. And then a match that I really enjoyed, Sammy Guevara versus Luchasaurus. Now, this was an entertaining match, as you would expect, not least because Le Champion, Chris Jericho, was on commentary alongside JR and Jake Hager, the Big Hurt, I think they call him. Guevara was super impressive early on in this match with a huge dive over the top rope, followed by a shooting star press off of the ring apron onto the Luchasaurus on the outside. Luchasaurus connects with a brutal German suplex before delivering a nice sequence of kicks before dropping Guevara face first for the pinfall victory. So after the match, Jericho and Jake Hager, Big Hurt, races down to the ring to attack Luchasaurus, only to have Jungle Boy get in there to out clean house. And Jungle Boy even got a visual pinfall over Chris Jericho, with Marco Stunt counting the visual pin there, perfectly setting up the Jungle Boy's non-title match against Chris Jericho in what the stipulation is 10-minute time limit match against Chris Jericho on next week's kind of massive episode of AEW Dynamite. And talking of massive, some of the matches that have been announced on next week's episode You've got the Lucha Brothers going up against Adam Page and Kenny Omega. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any more potential hints of a heel turn with Adam Page there teaming with Kenny Omega to go up against the Lucha Brothers. Britt Baker's taken on Chris Statlander in what is being advertised as a #1 contenders match. SCU will be defending their AEW World Tag Team titles against the winner of the main event, which will be taking place shortly. Santana and Ortiz versus the Young Bucks. And, of course, as I've just mentioned, Chris Jericho will be taking on Jungle Boy. So you've got, 4 matches there that could headline pretty much any card anywhere in the world that are going to be on the same show next Wednesday. And they obviously know that they've got a stacked NXT show to kind of go up against. But kind of give us your thoughts on some of the matches that we got to look forward to next week on Dynamite, going up against Adam Cole versus Finn Balor and Rhea Ripley versus Shayna Baszler. So you've got 4 big matches for AEW, 2 that have been announced for NXT. It's going to be a treat for any wrestling fan out there.
That's it. That's what winds my gears at the minute in regards to people, bitching and moaning about like AEW or NXT, or even just calling it, that Wednesday Night Wars. At the end of the day, this is literally like genuinely amazing. Like, you've just reeled off these matches there for us to watch next Wednesday night. Doesn't matter, if I watch NXT when it's on or I watch AEW, I'm going to watch both shows. It's just depending on which one I watch on at any given time. And the fact that we've got these matches on Wednesday night is absolutely mental. They say both of those, any of those matches would fit onto any pay-per-view anywhere and potentially still the show. It's going to be an amazing night, next Wednesday on both shows. And there'll be other little bits that we don't know about that are going to happen, which are just going to, make us, jaw-dropping moments, I would presume. And it's freaking awesome. That's, it's the best time to be a wrestling fan at the minute, I reckon.
It really is. But one kind of throw a little bit of a slant on what we're saying here. NXT throwing out some big championship matches next week. You've got some huge, you've got a championship match on AEW next week. You've got Jericho going up against Jungle Boy, Lucha Brothers versus Kenny Omega, Adam Page. They're pulling out the big guns in the big matches that would be kind of pay-per-view level matches, really. Am I being a little bit pessimistic that they're being kind of pulling out these big matches and these big names almost on a weekly basis just to try and capture some ratings, where some of these matches could be kind of, put on ice a little bit and maybe held off until a future pay-per-view or a future takeover? They're kind of, blowing some of these matches off too soon, maybe?
Well, possibly. I think the thing is, though, as we talked about earlier with the slow build to Moxley and Jericho and the pay-per-view being at the end of February, NXT have that benefit as well, where they don't have, like a big payoff show at the, every month. We're probably talking 4 or 5 NXT pay-per-views a year kind of thing.
Correct.
But again, they can do the slow build. You can have these highlight matches every 3 or 4 weeks potentially, and it still not feel like they're shooting the load for the sake of doing it, because we've still then got another 6 weeks after to build for the pay-per-view matches. Or it's like you get a peak in the middle of the feud before the big payoff at the pay-per-view. It works having like a 8-week, 9-week turnover between the big ones. And if they want to give us 4.5-star matches, on NXT or Dynamite, if these guys will probably go out there and want to knock it up a notch, that means that we're going to get 5-star matches, on the big shows.
Yeah, definitely. No, I understand what you're saying there and agree with what you're saying. Definitely. And that leads us nicely to the main event of this week's Dynamite then, and is the Young Bucks versus Santana and Ortiz, and it's a #1 contenders match. And it's billed as a Texas street fight, obviously with them being in Texas this week. And of course, the winner of this match will take on SCU in next week's massive episode of Dynamite. So this match started on the stage area after Matt and Nick Jackson, they were ambushed during their entrance. If I can get my words out, I'm so excited how this match went down. Even Brandon Cutler got involved, and he was double powerbombed through the staging area. Sammy Guevara gets involved, and he gets taken out with the out of the equation with an undie taker, I think they call it, spiked pile driver from Nick Jackson. Nick Jackson drives Ortiz through a table with a huge senton from off the entrance tunnel. So he climbs up through on top of this entrance tunnel they come through when they make their entrances, and smashes Ortiz through the table that's set up just underneath. And of course, with this match being a Texas death match, or a Texas street fight, there are no rules. There's tables, there's ladders, there's trash cans all set up around the ring. Santana goes through a table. You even have Matt Jackson. He went through a table next. And then we see Ortiz drive Nick Jackson through another table with a huge tope through the ropes. Jake Hager even gets involved. He pulls the referee from out of the ring. This causes Dustin Rhodes to come out and beat down Jake Hager. The Bucks then hit their more bang for your buck, but with the referee still out on the outside, they have to wait until Aubrey Edwards, another AEW referee, she comes racing down to the ring to make the count, but can only get a 2 count. Santana and Ortiz, they hit their street sweeper combo, but this time Edwards gets pulled out. So Aubrey Edwards gets pulled out of the ring by Matt Jackson to save the match for his team. The stiff offense continues with even more chairs, even more tables and trash cans being used. The Bucks get the win after this hard-hitting and punishing match, with Ortiz experiencing the best Meltzer driver head first into a steel chair in the center of the ring for the win for the Young Bucks. So, and it will be the Young Bucks taking on SCU. So we know what the tag team title match is going to be on next week's Dynamite, and that is going to be a phenomenal match. You've got 2 babyface teams going up against one another, so an interesting dynamic there. I think potentially the Young Bucks could be the most popular with the fans. I don't know. The SCU have definitely got their fan base, so the crowd could be split 50-50. But this was a hell of a match. And all 4 men, Santana, Ortiz, Matt, and Nick Jackson, they all put in some big moves. And this was a really, really big match to close off this week's NXT. So this week's AEW, my apologies. What were your thoughts on what we just witnessed here there, Nick? And looking ahead to next week's match between the Bucks and SCU?
Well, firstly, if what I read online, that Nick Jackson had basically been laid out for the entire day before this match with flu, and then managed to get up and perform like he did in this match. The dude is, you all can't see me, but I'm literally saluting the guy to actually do what he did during this match with flu is freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Secondly, I love the Brandon Cutler spot at the start. He's quickly becoming like AEW's Kenny. He just seems to randomly turn up and then just get killed.
Yeah.
It's just, but the match itself was great. It's like, beforehand, they must have, when they was prepping the match or whatever, he's like, we're just going to go out there and just try and level the crap out of each other. And it's like, yeah, we'll do that. And it worked. I think the right team won. Young Bucks, obviously, a great tag team. And next week against SCU, it's a weird dynamic, like I say, because it's 2 face teams going against each other. Well, on the flip side, in NXT, you've got 2 heel stars going against each other for the main title. So true. I think that'll be interesting on both shows. You've got 2 heels, 2 faces. But yeah, I think those guys, Young Bucks, Kaz and Scorpio, all know each other well enough that they'll go out there and hopefully have a well-structured match, not your stereotypical, it all turns into carnage after 6 minutes, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But that'll be my only concern for the Bucks SCU match, is that it's just going to be, a spot fest, which is great sometimes, but I would like to see, it's slightly more, refine that balance, get a bit of story in there, spot out as much as you want, but tell a story while doing it.
Yeah, and I think where I've been quite critical of the Young Bucks' matches since the launch of AEW, I think this match, although there was lots of spots in it and lots of crazy moves through tables and the use of trash cans and steel chairs, I think they were still able to tell the story, I think, for a couple of reasons. I think that the weapons helped to bring an element to the match and helped to add to the story, but also felt that the extra people that got involved, the Jake Hagers, the Brandon Cutlers, the Sammy Guevaras, the Dustin Rhodes, I think that helped the booking of the match and helped the story of the match, so that it wasn't all about the moves and it wasn't all about the spots. So I think, whereas I've been very critical of the Young Bucks' matches just being spot fests, I think this match was very kind of, it had that element to it, but I think it told a much better story than I've been used to with the Young Bucks before, because of the extra players in the game and the weapons, etc. So I think it really worked on this occasion.
Yeah, AEW do brawls so well. That's one of the things I'm enjoying about AEW is that it's got that old school feel. The brawls, you could bitch and moan about, oh, it always kind of, comes out into a brawl or it ends up ruining the match. It doesn't. It always adds more to it, I reckon. And yeah, that's what they do. And like I said, that was the perfect example of they got that balance right. They had the spots in there, but thanks to the brawls, thanks to the interference, it told a story as well.
Perfect. So, like I say, I don't think we can complain about this week's AEW Dynamite. It was a fantastic episode and a really hot way to open the show with that segment between the Inner Circle, Chris Jericho, and Jon Moxley as well, and that kind of leaving us hanging on a thread as to whether Jon Moxley will join the Inner Circle. He was obviously thinking about it. That's obviously going to build to a more longer storyline, as we explained, between those two. Eventually ended up in the match, possibly with their February pay-per-view Revolution. And then this really hot way to cap things off on Dynamite, and a really good match. I thought it was a fantastic match to close the show. But let's have a little look at a bit of conversation regarding the ratings, because I think this is week 11 now where NXT and AEW have been going head to head on a Wednesday night. I know you don't like the kind of term Wednesday night wars. I'm not a massive fan of it myself. But what's interesting is to see how the ratings kind of fluctuate on a week-to-week basis. Now, if I'm right in thinking, I think AEW have won the ratings between themselves and NXT on 8 of the 11 occasions, and NXT have won a couple, one by quite a big margin on I think Thanksgiving Eve. And then I think there might have been another occasion where they probably just slightly shaded NXT AEW in the ratings.
It was the following 2 weeks after Survivor Series, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And but this week was really interesting, and because apparently, according to reports, according to Brian Alvarez anyway, from Figure 4 Online, both shows scored exactly the same ratings. So both shows, and they actually saw a drop in the ratings, but both shows scored 778,000 viewers. And now that's an amazing kind of coincidence to have both shows come in at exactly the same viewership. Now, do you think there's anything behind this? I mean, do you look into the ratings at all, and kind of what's your thoughts on kind of the fact they've leveled out so much that they're actually equal in this week's ratings?
I do. As much as I said, I hate the Wednesday Night Wars term. I do obviously still have a look at the ratings just to sort of see what's going on, purely because I'm just waiting for the people that hate AEW for some reason to get all happy and smug if NXT does beat it 1 week. I don't think as I say, it doesn't matter. As an actual fan of out and out wrestling, I think any wrestling fan obviously should want both companies to do well, because it's best for business. It's just the ratings are what they are. Like I say, I do pay attention to them, but it's not. It don't really affect us in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And there's something else quite interesting that's come out recently. Is Chris Jericho went on the Conan's podcast, Keeping It 100. And he explained that he had to call a team meeting backstage with AEW talent and the whole crew, I understand, in relation to talent not following the rules and burying the referee in matches. So Chris went on to say on Conan's podcast that he called a meeting with the whole crew and said that you're burying the refs. If you don't have rules, then you don't get any heat, and it's killing our show because our honeymoon period is over, and now people are watching us and they are confused by the lack of rules. So that's slowly changing, he said to Conan on the podcast not too many days ago. So what were your thoughts on that? I know there's been quite a few comments and criticism online, certainly in their tag matches, where maybe the Lucha Brothers are kind of the biggest culprits of this for not tagging or using tags, or the use of the tag rope not being kind of followed properly, or the rules of the tag rope not being followed properly. And I think tag matches in particular seem to be coming into question. But I find Chris Jericho's statement on Conan's podcast quite interesting, and the fact that he did have to call a team meeting and kind of bring it back down to earth and back to reality, and to say, look, there are rules there, and if we don't follow the rules, then the fans are going to kind of catch us out on this one, and our credibility goes out the window. But what's your thoughts on some of Chris's comments there?
Definitely. I mean, he knows the business. If he's calling it as it is, he's got it spot on. You're right. Hopefully it wasn't a rah-rah speech. But they say the tag matches are key for that, because I remember in the first few weeks of AEW, JR tried to kind of cover it as much as possible. We've sort of saying, here we've got a 10-second rule to get outside of the ring. Normally, obviously, in WWE, you've got 5 seconds to hit your double team move and get out. They tried to cover it with the longer time period by saying, they had 10 seconds or 20 seconds, just to make it look like they weren't treating the refs like mugs. But yeah, it's the problem. It's an ongoing joke at the minute, is that the refs, through no fault of their own, is they must just be stupid, because there's that much stuff going on that they're not noticing or calling. It undermines, and Jericho's got it spot on. That is one of the negatives, of AEW, which it's a learning curve. It's like, say, 11 weeks now. I was going to say give them 12 weeks, and anything after the 12-week mark we can start being overly critical with, because they should have ironed this stuff out within the first 3 months.
Yeah, and I think that you said the right thing there. The sensible thing is to give them time to iron out these issues. But after a couple of months now, we're nearly 3 months in, 11, 12 weeks, they should have these issues. So I suppose Chris Jericho raising these points and addressing these points, certainly needed to be done at some point, and I'm glad they've done it now before it kind of impacts their performance, or before it starts impacting the content even more than it had before. So and reports are that the Lucha Brothers are following these rules. They're abiding by the traditional tag rules a little bit closer. And now that it's been addressed with everybody, we probably won't see so many GIFs and memes on botches, referee botches, or where the tag rules aren't being followed. But let's have a little look while we got the chance there, Nick, at some of the TLC matches. So we said at the very top of the show that we was going to kind of throw out some of our predictions and a bit of a preview for this coming Sunday's WWE TLC pay-per-view. Now, we've got the Viking Raiders. Now, I think they've issued a bit of an open challenge for the Raw Tag Team Championship, so we won't spend any time talking about the Viking Raiders because we don't know who their opponents are. I mean, do you have any thoughts on who might kind of step up to the challenge? Are we going to see a surprise, a team that we haven't seen before or for a long time? What are your thoughts on this one?
I'd say Street Profits. They gave them a bit of a tease of a match previously, but that lasted about 8 minutes. Give them about a 15-minute match, and it serves everybody, good. If Profits need to start doing something, they're just kind of backstage entities at the minute more than anything, which is underselling them. You're not using them to full potential. It would just be nice to get an established team up against the Viking Raiders, have them involved in this storyline for a couple of months. If it stops the Viking Raiders doing squash matches each week, I'm all for it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Street Profits would be good opponents for the Viking Raiders on Sunday. I'd love to see that match because, the Street Profits have been used not too well, we could say, compared to how they were used in NXT. But that would be a good match if they're given a good 10 to 15 minutes for sure. Rusev versus Bobby Lashley. This is described or advertised as a tables match. Some people are kind of saying that this storyline is ridiculous. Other people are starting to get into the storyline, but this is kind of a bit of their blow-off match to this feud. I don't know whether Alana is going to be the prize at the end of it for the winner. I don't really care, to be honest with you. But any kind of thoughts on this one? And who would you kind of pick out as your winner in this one? Bobby Lashley versus Rusev.
It's got to be Rusev. It's the only way he's coming out of it with any credibility. This match needs to be like a freaking 10-star Meltzer amazing match just to justify this feud this storyline for the last X amount of time. I know some people have enjoyed it because it's so bad it's entertaining.
Yes.
No, it's Lana just being awful on a week-to-week basis. It's just, I love Rusev. Rusev's great. I miss the Rusev day. Yes. Lashley's, he's been brought back in under, he could be not world champion, but he could have been one of those guys that's sort of feuding for, the IC belt or the US belt, and having very credible matches. Yeah. So I think the match itself will be awesome because both guys can go. It just needs to be freaking awesome to justify it.
Do you know what though? I've got a funny feeling that Lana's going to get involved, and Lana's going to get involved in the finish, and it could be a bit of a screwy finish thanks to her. So let's keep our fingers crossed that either she gets ejected or maybe knocked out at ringside, so they can just be left to finish the match and have a clean finish. But I'm interested to see what happens here. But the storyline I'm not a fan of, the two wrestlers, and hopefully the match I will be a fan of. But let's have a look at Aleister Black versus Buddy Murphy. So I don't think they've advertised the kickoff match yet for the kickoff show. Now, usually they have one or two matches on the kickoff show, but nothing's been officially announced as a kickoff match yet. This one, out of all of them, could potentially be relegated down to the kickoff. But to be honest with you, I hope that it doesn't, because I'm a big fan of these two. Aleister Black, I mean, we've barely seen him since he's come up onto the main roster. I know he suffered one or two injuries. And he's still not back up to 100%. Buddy Murphy, since he dropped his Cruiserweight Championship bout to Tony Nese at WrestleMania, we've barely seen him. He's been involved in one or two backstage things. He was briefly involved in the who attacked Roman Reigns angle with Daniel Bryan and all that. But we've barely seen him. I know he's had a really good match with Roman Reigns. I think it was Roman Reigns he had a good match with a few weeks ago. But Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black, two really excellent talents. But I'd love to see these two get a decent amount of time to really show what they can do in the ring. But what's your thoughts on these two?
Right, these two, we mentioned it earlier with the NXT show. If you're not on the main event, you want to go on first. For me, these two guys should be the first match on the main show tonight. I think they potentially, both of them are off the charts. Black's freaking amazing. Been a fan of his, since back in the Tommy End days. The guy can just go. He's totally underutilized at the minute. If that's because of injury, fair play. If it's because they don't know what they're doing with him, more fool them. But yeah, these two guys, Murphy as well. Murphy's top notch, but they could go out there, have a solid 10-15 minute match, open up the show, get the fans buzzing, because it's going to be counter after counter, pinfall after pinfall, near fall, and yeah, hopefully obviously ends with a black mass. Jobs are good one.
Yeah, like you say, if you can't main event, you want to open the show, and these two would be great show openers and to raise that curtain on Sunday nights. What about the Kabuki Warriors, Asuka and Kairi Sane versus Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair? On paper, this looks like quite an intriguing match. It looks like it could be quite a good match as well. I've got a feeling that there might be some storyline development here, possibly leading to a match or some sort of breakdown at Royal Rumble. I don't know whether they're lining Charlotte up as Becky Lynch's next opponent, or what might happen. Really, I'm enjoying what they're doing with the Kabuki Warriors of late. Since they got the tag team championships, they've turned heel. The Green Mist, I really like the cocky heel personas of Kairi Sane and Asuka. So on paper, this looks like quite an interesting match. I'm interested to see how it develops, how it goes. But this is for the Women's Tag Team Championships, of course, and it is going to be a TLC match. It's going to be a tables, ladders and chairs match. So with these four awesome talents involved in that sort of stipulation, I think it's going to be a real treat on Sunday night.
This is one of the matches I'm looking forward to more than the other ones. Purely the Kabuki Warriors are the highlight of SmackDown for me on a week-to-week basis. They're awesome. What they've done, I want to say SmackDown. I've got a horrible feeling though that obviously Becky and Charlotte are going to win. There's no way for them to lose via disqualification or anything like that, because it's a TLC match. There's no way they're putting the Kabukis over Becky and Charlotte, and it's just going to lead to a Becky and Charlotte feuding for the women's title, even though they are tag team title holders at the same time. Open up this strange dynamic for the future storytelling at the sacrifice of the Kabuki Warriors, who are awesome.
Yeah, I've got a kind of sinking feeling that you're right there, my friends, and I hope that we're wrong. Like I say, you can foresee a Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair feud happening around Royal Rumble time, possibly leading to WrestleMania. I don't know, maybe we're thinking too far ahead, but I think that whatever happens Sunday night will kind of be the seeds towards that. But I just hope that the Kabuki Warriors aren't the sacrificial lambs at the hands of Lynch and Flair. So I think that there's a lot of potential in the storyline with Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch. But I want them to keep the Kabuki Warriors strong if they can. But what about the New Day versus the Revival? Now, I was a little bit disappointed that the Revival, that they won a 4-team kind of elimination match last week to become the number one contenders to the New Day's crown. But I was a little bit disappointed that Shorty G or Chad Gable and Mustafa Ali didn't win that match, because I think that would have been some fresh opponents for the championship against the New Day. But the Revival, we're all big fans of the Revival, but we know what's coming when it comes to the Revival. We know they're going to get jobbed out sooner or later. But they keep getting put into these championship matches, Nick. They keep getting these opportunities. But we know that the long-term plans aren't great for them. We know that it certainly looks like it from the outside looking in, that the management aren't firmly behind the Revival like they should be, and that potentially the Revival could be leaving the company when their contracts end. So it's strange when they keep getting added into these championship matches. It's a match that I'm looking forward to, because I think a recent stipulation has been added where it's now a ladders match between the New Day and the Revival. So that should add quite a nice element to the match. But what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's going to be an enjoyable match because of the guys involved. Both teams can go. Both teams have got good chemistry. It's just, when the Revival are having matches, you kind of go online to sort of see when the contracts are up. If the contracts are up within the next few months, you're pretty certain they're going to win the belts. So WWE can kind of, give them a push and sort of say, look, we'll give you the belts if you sign a new contract. They sign the contract, they drop the belts, and then they get itchy and powder down the trunks for the following 8 months. It's just, I feel bad for the Revival. The guys are too good. The thing is, though, the creative have got no idea how to use them. That's the problem. But I think they could flourish, in any other promotion. AEW would be immense. NWA would be off the chart. I mean, I'd love to see the Revival down on NWA Power, but then I'd want them to have a bigger platform as well. But it's going to be a good match. Go online, check when the Revival's contracts are up for renewal. If it's at the start of next year, I'd peg them to win the titles.
Well, maybe. I mean, I'm going for the New Day because I think the outcome is fairly obvious, to be honest with you. I think that they're more behind a team like the New Day at the moment compared to the Revival, which is why it's a shame that they're not giving the New Day some fresh opponents and a fresh opportunity to say the likes of Chad Gable and Mustafa Ali, who deserve to be in kind of a tag team championship match like this, or any sort of highlighted match, any sort of featured match on a pay-per-view. It's a real shame they're not being shown more often. Have you got any interest, Nick, in the following match? Roman Reigns versus King Baron Corbin. Any interest in that one at all? It's a TLC match. There's nothing on the line. There's no titles on the line, apart from maybe a few tins of dog food. Who knows? But it's not a match that's really got me, to be honest with you. I've got no interest in this one. It's probably one that I'll be kind of skipping through on my review very quickly. But any interest in this one from yourself?
Yeah, I want to say I do. I'm a fan of Reigns. I think this last 12 months, people have started to warm to the fact, the guy is a great talent. They've kind of stopped pushing him down our throats now. So I think we're allowed to like him a bit more as a as a smart fan. Corbin, his work, he's doing well with what he's given. The dude is becoming possibly the top heel on SmackDown. The dog stuff's freaking awful. Not a fan of that in the slightest, but I do like the King Corbin thing. I like, it's old school Booker T when, he's got the crown, he sort of becomes this pretentious sort of, pompous, sort of like, I'm better than everybody else kind of character, heel character. I'll watch it. If they can have a solid match, awesome. I'm going to go into it with ridiculously low expectations, but hopefully I'll be pleasantly surprised, because both guys I've got the ability to have a very solid match.
I do agree with you, and I was kind of only kind of half serious. I mean, I do like these individuals. I'm intrigued by the stipulation, the tables, ladders, and chairs match. So it'll be interesting to see how they utilise the gimmicks. I do like King Corbin's character. I do like him as a heel, as a pompous heel, of course. I think my biggest criticism is the build towards the match, to be honest with you. How they built the match storyline, the guys in the dog costumes, the little yapping puppy on the screen, the use of the dog food last week. You would think, with these two top talents, that they're probably paying millions of dollars to every single year. If that's the best kind of build to a big match for a pay-per-view like this that they can come up with, then they need to sack the writers and start again, as far as I'm concerned, because a 5-year-old could have come up with a build to a match like this better than what they've given us.
And it's potentially the main event as well. That's the build to the main event.
But the match that I'm leaving till last is a match that kind of has got a lot of people interested for a number of reasons, and it's Bray Wyatt versus The Miz. Now, I have never really spoke about The Miz in kind of like in these sort of terms before, but it's piqued my interest. I mean, a few weeks ago, The Miz you've seen him weekly on Miz TV doing interviews. He had an okay feud with Shane McMahon leading up to WrestleMania, but he's kind of been a bit obscure, bit kind of in the background since then, really. So for the last 6 to 8 months, we haven't really seen a lot from The Miz. But Bray Wyatt's come into the picture now. It's not the Fiend, it's Firefly Bray Wyatt. So the kind of jumper, the sweater-wearing Bray Wyatt. Now, we've not seen him outside of the Firefly Funhouse, apart from maybe 1 or 2 backstage bits. And I think that when he had the photograph of The Miz's family and him in the photo replacing The Miz holding the baby, quite a haunting picture, but it's kind of intrigued me, and I like the fact that we're going to see Funhouse Bray Wyatt instead of the Fiend. I think that they were using the Fiend a bit too much. We were seeing him weekly, where it's kind of one of them special characters that needs to be protected and looked after, and kind of only used sparingly. And I'm glad that they've kind of switched up a little bit. It's very reminiscent of Mick Foley when he had the Mankind, the Dude Love, the Cactus Jack character, and kind of being able to switch and interchange between the two of them, like a bit of an alter ego, a bit of a bipolar thing. But I'm interested in this one because of Bray Wyatt and the dynamic that we haven't seen him outside of the Funhouse, and that it's become quite a bit of a psychological storyline with The Miz and The Miz's family getting involved as well. So what are your thoughts leading into this one, and who do you think might come out on top?
No, I fully agree with you, mate. It's weird. Well, it's not weird. It's good. That fact, like I said, the fact I'm invested in a match where The Miz is in for a start. The whole fact that you've got the Bray Wyatt Fiend dynamic, as you sort of said, the Fiend's going after Daniel Bryan, Bray Wyatt's going after The Miz. I think the match itself is going to be a good story. The Miz is consistent. He can consistently deliver 3.5 star matches. He's never going to give you a 5-star match, but he's never going to give you a 1 or 2 star either. The dude's safe. Not his biggest fan, but I've got to respect him. He's reliable, and Bray Wyatt is he's got such an amazing brain. From a creative point of view, massive Bray fan. The dude just looks like he could turn anything into a believable, interesting storyline. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm hoping we get a return of Morrison to help the Miz out tonight.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. But there we go. So after running down the matches, and it's only had 7 matches in out so far, it doesn't look too bad. Some of the matches there are definitely worth watching. I'm a little bit disappointed that there's no Nakamura and Sami Zayn. I think that they've become quite a decent, watchable part of SmackDown each week, or I think they're part of SmackDown. I lose track of kind of where the champions are nowadays because it's so interchangeable and it's so generic sometimes. But it should be good for what it is.
Apparently they were feeding Nakamura to Braun Strowman before Braun got injured. That's something I've heard.
Yeah, so maybe it's going to be a continuation of that storyline fairly soon. But Nick, we've spoken about NXT, we've spoken about AEW Dynamite, we've covered TLC. Do you fancy a 2-minute brainbuster quiz, buddy?
Good question. Well, but God, I'll do it. Yeah,
The rules are, so I've got a list of questions in front of me. They're all kind of fairly general knowledge wrestling questions. Some are tougher than others. Some are more recent than others. But when I hit the start button on my stopwatch and ask the first questions, the 2-minute starts, and you need to try and answer as many questions correctly in them 2 minutes. Now, at the top of the leaderboard, we got Grizz. from a couple of weeks ago, who answered 9 correct questions in 2 minutes. On the opposite end of the leaderboard, unfortunately, we got poor old Kieran down there at 3. So you got to, get somewhere in between, and that would be a credible effort. But these are questions that kind of span modern day wrestling, maybe wrestling from 10 years ago, some from the 90s maybe. But they're all kind of things that you probably would have heard or read about over the years as a wrestling fan, so hopefully you'll know the answers. But you can pass as many times as you want, but my advice is just, if you're not sure, kind of think about a question and give an answer, because it might be the right answer even if you're not sure, because once the 2 minutes are up, that's the end of the quiz. No matter where we are in the middle of the question or where you are in the middle of an answer, if you haven't fully completed an answer by the time it gets to 0, that is the end of the quiz, and we go back to the kind of last count of questions that you correctly answered, if I can get my words out. So the clock will start when I ask my first question then, Nick. So let me just get my finger poised on the start button here, and a nice easy one to kick us off, hopefully anyway. And the quiz starts now. Who did Chris Jericho beat to become the first AEW World Champion?
Pac.
Can you name Nick Aldis's opponent? Can you name Nick Aldis's opponent for the NWA World Title at this weekend's Into the Fire pay-per-view? So Nick Aldis's opponent.
James Storm.
Which former 8-time NWA World Champion died in August of this year?
Oh crap. Harley Race.
Who was the third member of the Brood after Edge and Christian?
Gangrel.
Can you name Booker T's real-life brother and Harlem Heat tag team partner?
Stevie Ray.
Who was the second person ever to hold the NXT Championship?
Pac.
In which city did Pat Patterson allegedly become the first ever Intercontinental Champion?
Toronto.
Who won the King of the Ring tournament in 1994?
Bret Hart.
What year did the first New Japan Wrestle Kingdom take place?
2006. I don't know.
Can you name the current Impact Women's Champion?
Shit, no. Pass.
Can you name one member of the Blue World Order? The Blue World Order.
Stevie Richards.
Which year did Hulk Hogan sign with the WCW?
94.
There are currently 3 two-time WWE Hall of Famers. Can you name one of them?
Ric Flair.
Oh, and that is the 2 minutes up, buddy. So let's see. You were asked 13 questions. So let's have a look. How do you think you did?
A couple of stupid answers that I should have known better. Probably about.
So I think the first one you're going to kick yourself over. So let's go through the ones that. Yeah. So who did Chris Jericho defeat to become the first ever AEW World Champion? You said I think you said Pac, but Adam Page. Of course, Adam Page won the Casino Battle Royal at Double or Nothing, and then they went on to face each other at All Out, I think, in August the 31st, and Chris Jericho beat Adam Page. So that was incorrect, unfortunately. You kicking yourself for that one. Should have got that one right. Can you name Nick Aldis's opponent in NWA Into the Fire for the world title? You correctly answered James Storm. Which former 8-time NWA World Champion died in August of this year? I think you said Harley Race. Did you not?
Yeah, I did.
Harley Race is correct. Well done. So that's 2 from 3 at the moment. Who was the third member of the Brood after Edge and Christian? You said Gangrel. That was also correct. Question 5. Can you name Booker T's real-life brother and Harlem Heat tag team partner, Stevie Ray? So that's another one correct. Who was the second person ever to hold the NXT Championship? So you answered Pac. Now, the first champion was Seth Rollins. So really, who beat Seth Rollins to become the second ever NXT champion? And it was Big E Langston.
Yeah.
There we go. So in which city did Pat Patterson allegedly become the first ever Intercontinental Champion? So it was kind of a bit of a made up storyline scenario where Pat Patterson was meant to have won a battle royal in Rio de Janeiro. Quite a famous story, but of course the match never happened. He was just handed the title, but that's a legendary story. Question number 8. Who won the King of the Ring tournament in 1994? I think you passed on that one, but the correct answer... Sorry, say that again. You said Bret Hart. Oh, Bret Hart. Bret Hart won the King of the Ring tournament in 1993. The following year, it was his brother Owen Hart. So unlucky there. You got the surname right, but not the Christian name. What year did New Japan Wrestle Kingdom take place? So you said 2006. Now next year will be Wrestle Kingdom 14. If you track back all of that, the first Wrestle Kingdom took place in 2007. So I checked my facts on that one. So you was 1 year out. So unfortunately, that's incorrect. Can you name the current Impact Women's Champion? I think you passed on that one. It was Taya Valkyrie, and she's been the champion for nearly a whole year. She's been a champion since January the 6th of 2019. Can you name one member of the Blue World Order? So you said Stevie Richards or Big Stevie Cool. You could have said the Blue Guy or Hollywood Nova, but you've got Stevie Richards. I'm going to give you that one. So that's question 11 correct. Which year did Hulk Hogan sign with WCW? 1994. You were correct on that one as well. There are currently three two-time WWE Hall of Famers. Of course, there's going to be more when the NWO go in. All of those would be two-time Hall of Fame Hall of Fame ring holders, and of course, you've got you said Ric Flair, and that was correct. You could have said Bret Hart, of course. You could have said Booker T, but Ric Flair was the correct answer there. Question, where are we? I think that was our last one actually. So let's tot all these up. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've already surpassed Kieran. 5, 6. 7. So you got 7 correct answers there. So well done, Nick. Officially second on the leaderboard, a couple behind Grizz, but a really good effort there. I think you did really, really well. How did you find the Brainbuster quiz, buddy?
Intense.
It's intense, isn't it?
Yeah. I threw me off the first question, and it was awesome. It's kind of nice to know that I do know some stuff as well.
Yes, I think you surprised yourself. You can be really proud of your effort there. Had you have got the first one right, had you have got Adam Page out, that would have been 8. And I think that there was a couple where you was maybe a year out. And like I say, you said Bret Hart instead of Owen Hart. You said 2006 instead of 2007. So there was potential to get a little bit closer to Grizz's score of 9. But well done, buddy. So you're second on the leaderboard. And 7 is a very good score, a very credible score. And of course, if you come on the podcast again sometime in the future, you'll have an opportunity to better your score. So Nick, I want to thank you for being our guest host on the Wrestling with Johners podcast this week. Do you have any social media handles, any kind of Twitter pages, any Instagram pages, Facebook pages where the listeners of Wrestling with Johners can go out and say hi, get in touch, ask you about your wrestling art, where they can just get in touch and say hi, Nick?
Yeah, Facebook page, which is Wrestling Artwork V2. Instagram, just Nik Towers, Nik Towers. Twitter would be Pencil Tree. There's a Facebook page as well called Pencil Tree Artwork. And yeah, just Nicholas Towers on Facebook. Well, obviously, you see me popping up in the comments on the podcast page occasionally, talking bollocks possibly, or trying to make it sound like about. But yeah, anybody wants to give us a shout or get in contact or give us a follow. Generally friendly guy, always happy to talk about wrestling.
Awesome. It's all good stuff. And what I try to do is put some of your social media links in the description to this episode so they can just click on that and find you and say hi. But Nick, thank you very much for being a part of the Wrestling with Johners podcast. I hope you've enjoyed your appearance on the show, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's been awesome. Thoroughly enjoyed it. You've officially popped my podcast cherry.
There we go. Well, I'm pleased to hear that, but thank you very much. And that's pretty much it from this week's episode of Wrestling with Johners. Please keep it tuned to the Wrestling with Johners podcast for all of your weekly NXT and AEW updates. Of course, regular WWE and AEW pay-per-view reviews and special interviews and so much more. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please don't forget to spread the word. Tell your friends and tell your family. And don't forget to hit that ever important subscribe button so that you can be notified every time a new episode drops. But in the meantime, from myself and from Nick, we'll catch up with you all again soon. Have a great weekend, guys.